Hey guys, David Vose here. Man, oh man, the sun's out. It's warm. It's beautiful. Oh, I'm happy about that. And the snow is melting. Well, I hope you're having a wonderful day, friends. I've got something that's really going to make some of you smile. It's going to make some of you laugh until you can't stop laughing anymore and you just fall down in exhaustion and go to sleep and restfully and peacefully dream of wonderful things because it's just so reassuring and hopeful and clears something up for me that I've been looking into for a long, long time. I was a vegetarian for about 15 years. But I did get sick. And I thought, well, maybe it was that I wasn't eating meat, and I went back to eating meat. And then I went on a complete meat eating diet for some months. All I ate was meat. And I felt a lot better. But I've noticed that there's things that's not going away. I've noticed that I can go and make a mistake, eat something that maybe has too much sugar in it. I had some, they were saying, oh, eat cocoa. Cocoa's great, right? So I'm like, well, I can't eat straight cocoa. But the chocolate bars that were 90%, I thought, well, I could eat that. And I cheated and I got a 70% one a couple times. Anyway, my back started hurting. But I don't know if it was because of that, but there was sugar in there. But it's also corresponding to the period of time where I've been driving around every day, going hither and thither, trying to pick up things and getting ready, preparing for the Great Tribulation. And during that time, I didn't have any food with me in the car, so I got hungry and I ended up, during that period of time, I ended up having 2 chimichangas at some gas station along the road. I ended up maybe 2, 3 times having hamburgers because somebody said if you just order the meat and don't eat the bun, you're safe, right? I don't know. I tried it a couple times. And there was this amazing little Mexican restaurant that I thought maybe they made their food from scratch. It looked like a good place. And I got whatever. I hadn't had any Mexican food for a while. And so I had several of those. But so I was eating out a little bit and eating foods that I know have poison in them. And it's just, I thought, well, the world's coming into an end and I might as well try and enjoy this one last time as a hamburger, right? But I haven't felt good. My back's been out. And another problem was that I was doing some lifting, but still, I didn't feel that my back should have been out. I've had a hard time sleeping. And I've been thinking about a lot of things and inflammation and different things like this. Why I would still have some kind of arthritis. Because I got rid of the arthritis during the time that I was a vegetarian. I never had much of it at all. I will say that. And there were other factors that may have caused me to get sick before. But it's all very confusing. And I'm sure some of you have had the same problem trying to figure out what and why and how come. And if you go to the internet and you try and figure out what's the healthiest food or what miracle pill is there today or something, or they've always got these, like I got sucked in last week. And I don't know if I got sucked in or I did the right thing. We'll find out. But some guy was like, oh, I found this one substance to get rid of the candidiasis. And it's so amazing. And we've studied it in a test tube and we got it right here in a pill. Plus all these other amazing herbs. And it was all natural and it guaranteed to cure you of everything. Get rid of all your candidiasis. And they were talking about how bad that is. It gets in your liver and plugs up your liver. And it's not really scars in your liver that's causing your liver not to function properly, but it may just be that it's plugged with candidiasis. And, I started thinking about that and I was like, well, I know I got candidiasis. I mean, there's times I get infections in my ear. I put peroxide in there. And I think, it's like when it begins to overgrow to the point where it's coming up in your ears And I think I can see it on my tongue and stuff when I look in the mirror, that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, I've heard a lot about this. This isn't normal. And I've been trying to get rid of it. I do think there's one thing that would probably do it, and that's if you took something like garlic cloves and smashed them in an appropriate way and popped one of those every day. You'd probably get rid of your candidas. I don't know, but I've never been able to do it every day because I don't like fresh garlic squeezed, and it one or two of them I can handle, but it starts making my stomach upset and it's difficult for me. So I did start eating raw onions for a while, but I haven't been able to do that enough. And there's all these things, and people say take vinegar and take this, and some people are saying borax, and I'm like, what? Yeah, nothing really that they say works in the sense that you do it and now you're 20 years younger. You don't have any more illnesses at all. And like people say that these things happen. People make a lot of claims. They say I ate this diet or that diet and cured this, cured that. For instance, there's a lot of videos out there right now where they're saying that if you just eat meat and only eat meat, a carnivore diet. You've probably heard Jordan Peterson, his daughter, very convincing what these people were reporting. I saw a woman that was like 400 pounds or something, and she went on an all-meat diet and lost it all, and she's beautiful and she's healthy. But see, you got to really be careful here, because when people say, I don't have any more problems with my back and I'm not sick and I feel good and I'm sleeping all through the night and all I ate is meat and I lost all this weight. Well, how can you argue with that? They did lose all that weight and they do feel better. But then somebody else says, well, I used to eat meat and everything and I quit eating meat. Now I'm just eating vegetables. Now I feel better and I don't have any back troubles and I don't have any pain and I sleep all through the night. Well, okay, so what's going on here? I think the problem is that it's kind of like the studies they do on Adventists and say they're vegetarians, but they don't do that much better than meat eaters in their lifespans. I mean, a year or two. And I think it's because if you are an Adventist, you're still eating sugar. You're still eating bread. You're still eating cereals and things, canned foods and restaurants. And so it's all bad for you. You'd have to, you wouldn't know if eating meat was good or bad because of that. You'd have to go and find somebody that was eating the right diet, natural, organic food, not hybridized fruit. And they didn't eat meat and see how well they did. I don't think we're eating, personally, this is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be experimenting eating a lot more food that grows naturally on the tree, out in the jungle, out in the desert here, and the pine nuts and the acorns and the berries, and I'm going to learn about all the different kind of wild fruits and vegetables and dandelions, and I'm going to have a garden and things like that. And I'm going to start eating things that I haven't really ate that much of over the years. I've just eaten like other people. I would eat bread for years and years until, like during the time I was a vegetarian, I still ate bread, right? And sometimes white bread. And I still did other things. I drank a glass of wine. I did other things. So it's very difficult to judge. But what I think is happening is when you say, okay, I'm going to start thinking about diet, whether it's only eat meat or only eat vegetables, you're trying to eat right. You're not eating poisons. So if you're eating vegetables, you're probably not eating as many poisons going out to eating all these candy bars and whatever. And by the same token, if you're just eating meat, you're probably not going out and eating all these poisons and canned foods and restaurant foods and box foods. And so either way, whether you just eat meat or just eat vegetables, you're probably going to feel better. But what we want to know is, why do we have this aversion as human beings to killing animals? Isn't that the old covenant was based on death, and it's such an abomination, and they're going to go and kill this red heifer, and we're talking about how awful that is, and they're going back to the sacrifice. But they're doing it because they're appeasing some angry deity. I don't even think that was the original intent of sacrificing animals. I think it meant they slaughtered them and they had them they ate them, and they understood they were getting life from the animal, and they had some kind of prayer and they showed respect. But it grew into this weird patriarchy that decided they were the boss and they were hunters and blah, but I can show you that biblically Christians are allowed to eat meat for certain. Jesus did eat fish. And at least it says he did. If we can trust the Bible that we have. The disciples ate fish. They were fishermen. And we know the Apostle Paul says anybody who only eats vegetables is weak. And that word is elsewhere translated sick, where it says there are many sick among you, that kind of thing. So he wasn't just talking about weak in faith, but weak in body because you just eat vegetables. Well, maybe the Apostle Paul didn't do a scientific study and wasn't really talking about what was healthier or not healthier for you, but was talking about your faith, and we shouldn't make laws because people do sometimes. Even the prophet Joseph Smith said that we could eat meat in times of famine and in the winter. And that's something that always was heavy upon me because I do believe that Joseph Smith had a special connection to the Lord. And he knew things. He just got revelations that were definitely from the Lord. But this meat thing has always been very difficult for me because when I look at the idea of humans eating, consuming cannibalistically, I don't like it. It doesn't make any sense. But I see the other point of view because it's the cycle of life, and you could certainly, if you had to live in the wild and the only way you could survive is to eat meat, it seems like that could be an appropriate way to live. I don't know. It's very difficult because we get calloused. Perhaps if we had never eaten meat before, we would just be horrified at the idea. And perhaps we've become numb and we don't even understand how evil and wicked it is. Perhaps if we didn't do that, we'd change the basic fabric of nature, and even the lions wouldn't eat the rabbits. We don't know. What we do know is that the Bible says during the millennium, the lion will eat straw like the bull, and the lamb and the wolf shall lie down together as one, and the serpents will not bite the little babies. And this is a lot of esoteric information, but I believe it will be literal. I have every confidence that during the millennial, animals won't eat animals, and we're not going to eat animals. And that means that was our purpose originally. But we've been cursed. Yahweh cursed the ground so it wouldn't produce for us. So even if we did go back to eating vegetables, if you go out in nature, you realize that all these plants don't taste very good. They're bitter. And if you try to eat food grown as agriculture, that's destroying the earth. It's a proven fact that agriculture has been the downfall of mankind because it made slavery, and it meant that one guy could own all this acreage, get a bunch of slaves, they'd all grow corn or cotton or something, and he'd have to have a bunch of slaves to pick all this, and they'd get a portion, but he'd be the owner. And that's what's created this monopoly and this evil system that we have. Plus, when they just grow corn, then you rototill all the ground, and you don't allow an ecological system. There's no worms or bugs in the soil. You got all these pesticides. There's no squirrels or mice or anything in the field because the combine goes through and just wipes it all out every few days, a few months. They got to harvest. So there can't be any deer running through there very much. They can't live there. They can walk through it, but a lot of the smaller animals are gone, and all the bugs and the environment is just gone. And if you look around the world today, this idea agricultural living is destroying the planet. And I could go into that more in detail. So it's almost immoral to eat the agriculture. But now that's box food, canned food, restaurant food. But what about going back into nature and eating the vegetables and fruits? I mean, here on this property, we've got yucca, we've got pine nuts, we've got acorns, and you say, well, acorns are bitter. Yeah, but you process them like you do beans. You got to put salt on them. You got to boil them. You got, you roast them like you don't eat peanuts raw. We don't even eat coffee beans raw. We roast them. Everything is cooked. But it probably shouldn't be cooked. And the thing of it is, Yahweh put a curse on the ground that it wouldn't produce but thorns and thistles. And so Yahweh tells Adam, I want you to be a slave, and I want you to till the soil by the sweat of your face running down your brow. You will serve the ground till you die. Dust you are, dust you shall return. Friends, there's no way out of this curse, as long as we're in this cursed world. So I don't know the answer. The apostles did not tell us we had to be vegetarian. Although I think, according to tradition, some of them were. I know that James the Just was. And it seems that John the Baptist may have been. We know that Nazarenes didn't eat meat, except they might have been allowed to eat fish and pigeons. But only on rare occasions when they were making certain renewal of their vows and stuff. But they were not allowed to eat meat. And we don't know whether that was some ceremonial thing, or is there some scientific merit to, is it better for us not to eat meat? If we're going to eventually go back to doing that, you'd say, well, that'd be great. But what if our molecules, our bodies in this cursed mortal condition, what if we literally cannot even survive without meat? Because aside from the idea that we need all this protein and this balanced protein and animal protein that we're going to discuss today, there are a lot of other issues that we're going to have to discuss. So I'm just going to discuss one aspect of something that I'm not sure was quite true the way I was being told before. And this will help for us to decide whether or not it really would be healthy. And that's all we can determine here, is whether or not it would be healthy for us to eat no meat, or whether it would be more healthy for us to eat only meat, or whatever it is, vice versa. So I want to take a look at that. So I was doing some research, and I noted that mankind pretty much lived on meat for thousands of years. But then you can deceive yourself in so many ways. People believe a lot of times what they want to believe. Why would you think that ancient peoples only ate meat? I mean, there's vegetables everywhere. I think human beings today enjoy a big meal that's spread before them. There was cuisine, fine cuisine, and cooking and baking and all these things that we've done with bread for thousands of years. So I'm sure, I mean, the Bible's very old. You can go back to the Sumerian tablets and in Egypt and stuff, and they always had bread. As far back as we know, mankind ate mostly bread and meat. They ate a lot of meat, but if they were living in little city states, there wasn't a lot of meat in the city. In fact, they had walls to keep the beasts out. So they'd have to go hunting just like we would. They lived in little city states. Mankind, there has always been people that lived in the woods somewhere, probably just ate mostly meat, like some people in Alaska today. But for thousands of years, it's not true that men were out in the jungle eating meat, and, because vegetables are they don't have a very good taste, and then the wild berries, and you find very few berries and things. It'd be obvious, though, that even people that live in the wild, the caveman, would find berries and eat them, and nuts, because they're very good, and they'd probably not be so stupid, unless we're talking about some animal, some Pro-Magnum, caveman or something. But as long as humans have been humans, I'm sure we've been intelligent, and we've had a taste for nuts and breads and things like this. So it's not necessarily true that mankind's always eaten just meat. I don't know how they got me thinking that for a little while. I was thinking, oh, maybe so. I was thinking about these cavemen eating meat out there, But, even they probably couldn't catch a rabbit one day, and they'd have to eat some grass or something, whatever. But so that's not necessarily true. But it's not a bad point, though. We know that human beings have always eaten meat. So if meat was part of our diet, then should we still eat meat? But then if you think about it, if you were to be on a high sugar diet, and that's not normal, maybe it would react with the meat differently. I'm going to share something with you here about one particular amino acid that is mostly in meat and not so much in vegetables, that they've restricted this group of mice. They've restricted this one amino acid that's mostly found in meat. And they restrict that, and the mice live 33% longer and healthier and have more muscle tone and mass and strength and vitality and so forth. And they don't have any diabetes. And they're saying that this one amino acid may be what's causing diabetes and probably a lot of other things, but it's what controls your insulin levels or something, your glycemic, whatever. So that got me thinking. Because the other thing I've been thinking about is, for the last few months I've been eating meat, but I really don't like it. And remember, I'm buying it. I'm not killing my own animals. And I've got these chickens, and I will tell you, to be honest, if you want to know the real truth, sometimes when these roosters get to crowing, I think, man, I'm going to have me a chicken dinner. Woo-wee. But then I think, man, I don't want to do that. I just don't like killing an animal. I don't think I could do that. I didn't like it when I was a little kid, and I've never killed animals. The only time, my dad was a hunter. I've told you guys about this, and I mean, the biggest hunter you've ever known, him and his brother, and they go every year hunting and pack out a deer from Deer Creek up in California and put it on their shoulders and their guns and everything, packing this all up out of a canyon. It was crazy. And they'd bring it home, and Mom and Aunt Darlene would get after they skinned it and did all this out of it, then it had these hearts and livers and all this stuff, and that would all be prepared for Dad and Uncle Frank. And they would sit there and eat this organ meat. And I've talked a lot about how wonderful and healthy organ meat is. But, by the way, it does have slightly lower, this amino acid we're talking about is isoleucine. Well, I remember when I was 15, this is the last time I really saw my mother and father together, and we went hunting. And I was old enough to get a tag, or whatever, the license, or whatever they call them now. And I remember Dad went up around the hill, and I saw these deer jump out, and I got one. And Dad came back smiling ear to ear. I don't think he's ever been proud of me any other time other than that time. Like, I felt so loved for a moment. Like Dad was so proud of me because I shot that deer. And then we had to gut it out and do all that stuff, and it was just terrible. And I felt so bad. I didn't think I liked it much. But I never went hunting again after that. I've never been hunting since. So I've been thinking about that lately too. And how, here we are about to go into the Great Tribulation. And on the other side, we may not even eat meat. After the change, we probably won't eat meat anymore. And I've said we might still eat fish. But we really don't know any of this stuff. This is only what I gather from the fact that in Ezekiel it says they still will be fishermen along the river. And but that, obviously is very esoteric. But I've always said, if the Old Testament says something, I do believe that you might be able to take that literal as well as esoteric. I do believe the lion will eat straw like the bull. I take that literal. I think that will be something that will happen. And therefore, if he's going to heal the rivers, as it says in Ezekiel, and then we'll be fishing for fish, and we'll have all these fish. And Jesus gave us fish. I thought, okay, maybe that's what we'll have during the millennium. We'll eat a lot of fish. Well, I did notice that fish are slightly lower in this one amino acid that seems to make us live longer if we reduce our intake. But enough of that, and just let me share with you something here. I found this article here today, and it says, Science Alert, cutting back on one amino acid increases lifespan of mice up to 33%. Research in mice shows limited intake of one particular essential amino acid can slow the impact of aging and even lengthen lifespan. Scientists are now wondering if these findings could help people improve their longevity and the quality of life. Isoleucine is one of the 3 branch chain amino acids we use to build proteins in our bodies. It is essential for our survival. But since our cells can't produce it from scratch, we have to get it from sources like eggs, dairy, soy, protein, and meat. But there can always be too much of a good thing. Earlier research using data from a 2016 to 2017 survey of Wisconsin residents had found dietary isoleucine levels were linked with metabolic health, and that people with higher BMIs were generally consuming much greater quantities of the amino acid. Different components of your diet have value and impact beyond their function as a calorie, and we've been digging in on one component that many people may be eating too much of. Metabolism researcher Dudley Lamming from the University of Wisconsin, United States, who was involved in both studies, explained in November when the new findings were published, it's interesting and encouraging to think a dietary change could still make such a big difference in lifespan and what we call health span, even when it started closer to midlife. In the most recent studies, a genetically diverse group of mice was fed either a diet containing 20 common amino acids as a control, a diet where all amino acids were reduced by 2/3, or a diet where only isoleucine was reduced by the same amount. The mice, now remember, they didn't get rid of the isoleucine, they just reduced it by 2/3, and everything else was the same. The mice were around 6 months old at the start of the study, which is the equivalent age of a 30-year-old person. So, okay, you can start this after you've grown up. And it helps. They could eat as much as they wanted. I mean, can you imagine if you didn't eat it when you were a baby either? If this is so bad for you, reduce it by 2/3 from the time you're born, and maybe you'd live 50 or 100% longer. Well, it says they could eat as much as they wanted, but only from the specific kind of food provided by their group or to their group. Restricting dietary isoleucine increased the lifespan and health span of the mice, reduced their frailty, promoted leanness, and glycemic control. See, glycemic control. Male mice had their lifespan increased 33% compared to those whose isoleucine was not restricted, and females had a 7% increase. These mice also scored better in 26 measures of health, including muscle strength, endurance, blood sugar levels, tail use, and hair loss. Hair loss. I might need some of that. The male mice in this group had less age-related prostate enlargement and were less likely to develop the cancerous tumors that are common in the diverse mice strains. Curiously, the mice given low isoleucine food also ate significantly more calories than the others. But rather than gaining weight, they actually burned more energy and maintained their leaner body weights, even though their activity levels were no different. What? Okay, give me some of that. I want some of that. These researchers think restricting isoleucine in humans, either by diet or pharmaceutical means, has the potential to yield similar anti-aging effects. Although, as with all my studies, we won't know for sure until it's actually tested in humans. Well, we have to wait till hell freezes over for that because they don't want you to be healthy, So, it says restricting protein intake in general, for instance, has detrimental effects. See, so we're not talking about just don't eat protein, but just some particular amino acid in protein. And that would be a particular one that's high in meats and dairy, but low in vegetables. Now, let me show you something I looked up some things I had some ideas, right? And so I started looking some things up. So I found this article that says top 10 foods highest in isoleucine. And so there's beefsteak. Now take a look at that. 6-ounce beefsteak has 2,686 micrograms or milligrams of this isoleucine. That's a lot, 3,000, and it's 192% of what you're supposed to have. So 200%. And that's only a 6-ounce steak. So that's just for dinner. If you ate breakfast and lunch, you'd be, you know, you'd be dead, right? You got way too much of this isoleucine. So there's other meats, 110, 3 ounces of veal is 110%. Lamb roast, 3 ounces. I mean, who eats 3 ounces of meat? Just 3 little ounces. You got all the isoleucine you're supposed to have in meat. Chicken, and you can go down through this, and all the meats are the same thing, 200%. Here's pork chops, 2,500 milligrams in a 6-ounce pork chop. Tuna has 2,343 milligrams in 6-ounce filet. Tofu has 2,100. You're going down a little bit better than meat, but it still has per cup 2,139. Although I don't know whether we can compare a cup with 6 ounces or whatever, but it goes on down here. Soy is high. Milk is still high, but much lower. A 16-ounce glass of milk. That's a lot of milk. Most people don't drink that much milk a day, probably. But one glass of milk is 853 milligrams. And that's only 61%. So that's a lot better. And yogurt, 52%. Plain yogurt. Swiss cheese, 31%. Low-fat buttermilk, 30%. Cheddar cheese is only 26% of your recommended daily. So you're lowering your isoleucine when you go into dairy. Now, here we're going into vegetables. Lentils. 1 cup of lentils only has 772 milligrams. So that's like 4 times less than the meats, right? Something like that. It's only 55% of the RDI. And you can go down with beans, all the different beans, 55 to 48%. Black beans are better than white beans, I guess. And then you can go into wheat. This is Kamet Corazon wheat. I don't know what kind of wheat that is, but this wheat is only 27%. So we're lowering it now. Only 378 milligrams as opposed to what we were looking at with the meat, which is 2,500 or 3,000 milligrams. But this is only 378. Now we're talking about bread, right? Of course, they put a lot of other poisons in your bread. But so then we go down to all these whole grains high in isoleucine. And these are the ones that are high, right? And this is 26%. Quinoa is 21%. Pasta only has 20%. Wild rice, 20%. Oatmeal, 19%. Brown rice, only 16%. We're getting lower and lower. And it seems like the more organic and natural it is, the better, because the brown rice is best so far. Then we go to pumpkin seeds and squash. And they only have 359 milligrams. But that's only an ounce or a handful. So I wasn't sure about that, because when you go to the 100 grams, you get 1,265. So I don't know about squash, pumpkin seeds and squash. Of course, maybe we weren't supposed to eat the seeds in squash. I don't know. But nuts. Now, nuts seem pretty good. Hemp seeds, only 26% per ounce. Okay, well, I don't know if I'd be eating more than an ounce anyway, I guess. Sunflower seeds, 20%. Pistachios, 19%. Flax seeds, 18%. Peanuts, 17%. Chia seeds, 16%. Now we're getting down to the lowest we've had so far, 15%, and that's almonds. So it seems like you could probably eat nuts. Maybe even a little dairy. Maybe some beans. But don't go with that meat. There's too much of that isoleucine. Make you get diabetes. Is that what they're saying here? Here's peas, 323 milligrams, 23%. Spinach, 20%. Swiss chard, 19%. Mashed sweet potatoes. Oh, I love them. 18%. Pea sprouts, 15%. And we get down to the lowest we've had so far, Brussels sprouts, 11%. And sweet corn, 13%. Well, I said maybe we got a pattern here. Let's do some more research here. So I was looking around and found this article, and it says, I'll just read this. It says, does the lower protein intake from vegetarian diets mean that this intake is too low to meet protein requirements? In general, protein intakes are high in the overall population. So we're getting too much protein no matter who you are. In Western countries, countries with the highest level of income, protein intake has risen markedly over the past century, in line with an increasing consumption of animal products, and notably meat. Okay, so we're getting higher levels of protein than what we should have, and this corresponds with the fact that we're eating more meat. It says this increase in the contribution of animal products to total energy intake is a central feature of the nutritional transition that has affected Western countries in the 20th century and that is ongoing in developing countries. For instance, the total protein intake in Spain rose from 79 grams in 1961 to 106 grams in 2009, while the proportion of animal proteins increased from 33% to 61%, according to FAO food balance sheets. In most industrialized countries, the protein intake of the general adult population reaches 100 grams a day, and blah, 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 corresponding to a total energy intake of 16%. However, depending on the country, specific region, or gender, total protein intake varies little in the general meat-eating populations, remaining within the 13 to 18% range of energy intake. In the general adult population in Western countries, the average protein intake is about twice the estimated average requirement. So we're getting twice as much protein as we need overall. Therefore, when comparing protein intake in the whole population with the distribution of requirements, it has been concluded that virtually everyone in Western populations consume more than their individual requirement. Against this background, it is expected that although protein intake is very often lower with a vegetarian diet, it will be sufficient. It says here, it is commonly, although mistakenly, thought that the amino acid intake may be inadequate in vegetarian diets. As we and others have argued, the amounts and proportions of amino acids consumed by vegetarians and vegans are typically more than sufficient to meet and exceed individual daily requirements. Provided a reasonable variety of foods are consumed and energy intake needs are being met, the claim that certain plant foods are missing specific amino acids is demonstrably false. All plant foods contain all 20 amino acids, including the 9 indispensable amino acids. But the problem here comes in is that vegetables don't have a complete balanced protein, but if you eat all varieties of vegetables, then you do have a balanced protein. You will find all the various proteins and amino acids in vegetables, but you got to eat a variety. So I was told that you could eat like corn and beans together and your protein is complete. But if you just ate beans, you'd be missing some or deficient. Now they're saying they're kind of backtracking on this because this is what they used to say. But now this article is saying that they're not missing in any vegetable. They're just very low in some, and you need to eat a variety of different vegetables. So this says, importantly, rather than missing indispensable amino acids, a more accurate statement would be that the amino acid distribution profile is less optimal in plant foods than in animal foods. Lysine is present in much lower than optimal proportions for human needs in grains, and similarly, the sulfur-containing amino acids, methionine and cysteine, are proportionately very slightly lower in legumes than would be optimal for human needs. But you don't just eat beans, you see, and that's how you balance it. This would be important for someone who ate only rice or only beans for sustenance every day. This classic implementation of a protein quality assessment framework focusing on isolated single proteins remains an erroneous approach in practice. The terms complete and incomplete are misleading. In developed countries, plant proteins are mixed, especially in vegetarian diets, and total intake of protein tends to greatly exceed requirements. This results in intakes of all 20 amino acids that are more than sufficient to cover requirements. Of course, we're still not talking about certain things like hemi-iron or different kinds of minerals that you find in meat. Certain, even vitamins, like that the body can assimilate better and digest and use. For instance, vegetables have carotene, which is, they say, vitamin A, and your body can take that carotene and turn it into retinol. You need a lot of retinol to build muscle and heart tissue and brain tissue and things like this, and eyes. But carotene, they say, can be used, but it's more efficient to use retinol, which you get from meat. And there's lots of these. All these different vitamins have animal-based vitamins and then plant-based vitamins. And usually they claim that the animal-based vitamins are better for you. But I'm going to do more research into that as well. They also claim there are vitamins you just can't get from vegetables that you can get from meat that they're actually lying about. And I've been aware of that for some time. So they say, well, you got to eat meat in order to get your vitamin B. You got all these different vitamin Bs, and they're all essential. And people are weak, and they've even got vitamin B pills that people are popping to get stronger. And we need all this vitamin B, but we're not getting any of the vitamin Bs from the vegetables. And there's a couple other vitamins like that. But things like tyrosine and these weird things that they say you have to get from meat. But what I found, they're lying, because these things like vitamin B, they're made from fermentation in your stomach. So we do make them, but not in a metabolic sense, but we make it in our gut through digestion and through fermentation in the gut. They're lying about that. So they say you can get these vitamin Bs from meat and liver, and fish. But what they don't tell you is that cows eat grass, and their bodies don't produce these vitamin Bs either, because the vitamin B is produced in their stomach with fermentation. And so that's why sometimes you can get it in the liver, or in the organs. But the cow survives without eating grass that's got vitamin B in it, and produces it in his gut the same way that we survive without eating meat to get vitamin B, because we produce it in our gut. So they're really just lying. I mean, it can't be that dumb. I don't think they're that dumb. The doctors probably are. They repeat whatever they're told. They're little parrots. But I mean, the medical industry probably somewhere knows that they're lying. And this has probably been given as orders from headquarters, right straight from the Bavarian Control Center, to kill us. So there's certainly a lot of lying going on, for certain. Just like they say they went to the moon or whatever. A lot of the things they tell us is a lie, where they control everything in the world, our minds included. But I'm now going to start doing some more research whether eating meat is actually healthy or not. And I'll tackle a lot of these questions, like, are there parasites in meat? Well, we know there is. I have had meat that I bought at the store that sat out and didn't get used in time, and I saw bugs growing inside the package. I know that there are worms in especially pork and fish and any kind of meat. There are literally worms in there, and those worms didn't come from flies laying eggs, because meat goes into a butcher shop where it's really cold, there are no flies. All this meat is prepared and even packaged in cold freezers and coolers where there are no flies. And there are FDA people walking around monitoring everything. They wouldn't have flies in there. That wouldn't be permitted. But this meat still has parasites that somehow got into the meat before the animal died. So we know that meat definitely has parasites. I mean, it was designed that way because when the animals die, these little bugs and worms eat up the flesh. And they're called retroviruses. And we also know this is where we get, supposedly, the flu strains. We got different kinds of flu strains. You ever notice that? There's the swine flu and then there's the bird flu. Well, they're neither one of them coming from swine or birds. They come from the parasites. And so sometimes you can get infected with the same parasite or different parasite from a swine as you can from a bird, or you can get them from monkeys, or you can get them from even dogs and animals of all kinds. So we know that all of these meats have parasites, and parasites lead to disease. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the only reason that we've got disease, but I'm just pointing that out. So it would seem logical that we wouldn't want to eat meat, although they say if you cook it all the way, you shouldn't have any problems. Maybe. But a lot of people don't always do that. Some people eat their meat rare. And I know there are people running around eating raw fish, and I would never do that. The sushi thing. There's a lot of people have a lot of parasitic problems in Japan and China and places where they do this. You should never eat raw meat, friends, ever. But I'm on this particular point right here, right now, that if we find that we could lower one particular amino acid, that we'd live longer. Maybe the kinds of amino acids that you get in plants are actually better and make you live longer than if you were to eat this balanced protein and meat. I don't know. I'm postulating this and I'm going to do some research. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. We've wet your whistle on some of that, and we'll do some more research and probably do another video on this down the road when I have some more revelation on the subject. So I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. May the Lord bless you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow. Same bat channel, same bat time. Have a good one.